just want to pick up a wee bit just before we bring on Hywel and Debra, because the next hour or so, it'll be interesting, right? Some of it will be at the front, some of it will be at the back. You'll need to get up and move, you'll need to do all sorts of things, you'll need to join in, you'll need to participate. It'll be a conversation, but not the normal type of conversation. So you need to be up for a bit of activity, you need to be up for a bit of action around that. I think what's really important for me, I've spent a lot of this week reading Terry Wrigley's book. Don't know if any of you are familiar with Terry Wrigley, but he's got a book called Living on the Edge. And what he talks about, he talks about styles of education and approaches to education which actually work in terms of engaging disengaged young people. The whole Terry Wrigley thing about this whole idea, what kind of pedagogies actually engage the young people whose attainment we're talking about raising. And what he argues in the book is that it needs to be around turning schools round to face their communities. One of the key phrases he talks about. It's not about isolating schools, it's not about looking inwards, it's not about obsessing with tests. And he talks about a curriculum which is engaging, and he talks about a curriculum which has meaningful outputs. And so much of what we do with young people in our schools, the only output is an assessment that's a closed assessment between the marker and the learner. And there's no sense of the value or worth of what they do. And he then talks about how we can look at presentation, how we can look at offering a curriculum that's genuinely co-created, and how you can tie that together with the need to create a genuine language, a knowledge, a grammar, whatever terms we want to use to describe it. But he does that really passionately in his book, and he does it backed with lots of references, lots of data. The book's co-written with an Australian author. It's really dense stuff. I mean, there were loads of bits I had to read twice, and some I had to read 3 times. It wasn't exactly an easy read. And as I was reading through it, I thought, God, I wish Debra Kidd and Hywel Roberts were here, because they could show me what this looks like. And that's what today's about. Today's about how you create a curriculum from young people that starts from where they are. And if they don't have anywhere to be that they can be together, how you can create a space for them. And the brilliant thing about this is about virtual learning and real learning coming together, but it's not virtual learning that's done through ICT, it's virtual learning done through creating a space in the imagination. And there's a space on the floor which we'll go to and use later on, but it's fundamentally an empty space, and the curriculum is how you populate it. And that whole idea that's contained in the title about this is into the forest, which is a dubious place to go with Roberts, let me tell you. But a lot better than having them at your house for dinner. Last night was serious. But there's also this concept of rolling in the deep, because the worry is that what we're going to do is we're going to move away from rolling in the deep as far as curriculum and learning is concerned and start walling in the shallows. And walling in the shallows might lead us to think we're making progress, but it's not going to take us anywhere where we can swim. It's going to get us really good at paddling. And unless we open up the discussion around what this curriculum look like, and how can we not only, and thanks Ken for making the reference to it, how can we imagine things back up and then make sure that we engineer them back down through knowledge, grammar and understanding, so that we've got something that's not only engaging, but something that's actually meaningful and translates. And I think, Debs, you're going to start off. The woman I quote more than any other woman in the known universe, the queen of pedagogical activism, which will be the butterfly wing of change, Debra Kidd. Put your hands together.
I'll try not to stand in front of the light with my name plastered all over my face. It's really lovely to be here. My husband's a fifer, and it's really lovely for me to come up. And he was a bit jealous that he couldn't come, so I'm hoping he'll invite me back and then he can come with me next time. Steady on. So Hal and I sat on the train yesterday, and we were thinking about how we could make this idea of going into the forest resonate across all your different settings and the different kind of places you work in. And we were talking a little bit about the multiple layers of complexity we have in the classroom. In a minute, we have a system in the education system, and it's worse south of the wall, I think, as well, where we're trying to reach for simple solutions all the time. And our government is saying to us, what works? This is what we want. We want evidence-based practice. We want to know what works. And all they ever really ask is what works in order to get kids through tests. The question's never any bigger than that. It's not what works in terms of making a better world, what works in terms of making children more confident, more agentive in their futures and in their lives. It's just about how do we get them through tests. So we wanted to really look at all the multiple pathways you can take and the levels of complexity you can have at any point in your classroom practice. We have big choices to make in terms of what do we teach and how do we teach it, but we also have these little moment-to-moment choices that we make at a moment of complexity. And I was telling him a little story yesterday about a little girl. I was teaching Year 4 last week, and we were starting off with Alice in Wonderland. They didn't know it was Alice in Wonderland at that stage. What they'd done is they'd come to the classroom and there was a sign on the door that said the Magical Missing Persons Bureau. And the children came in and they were employees of the Magical Missing Persons Bureau, and they interviewed a lady who said her daughter had gone missing. She'd disappeared down a hole. And the only clue we had was a little bottle that had the words "drink me" on it. And when Dad had tasted the last drop of that bottle, he'd shrunk. So her dad was a bit short, she'd had to take all his trousers up, she wasn't happy at all. And we had to go and investigate this girl. So one of the things the children said was, we're going to have to make a shrinking potion and a growing potion so that we can get into the rabbit hole, but we can also come back and re-enter the real world when we found her. Well, one little girl got so excited she farted. She sat there and she let out a big and then at that point we had a choice, because behind her were three little boys going that's great, and she was bright red and she was embarrassed. And as a teacher, I think I can ignore it, I can tell the boys to leave her alone and I can draw attention to it, or I can seize an opportunity. So I said, quick, we need a bad smell for our spell, bottle it. And suddenly we've got 20 kids wafting the smell into an imaginary bottle and labelling it. And, they came up with different labels, like an inky stink was one of them, and a bad whiff, and, So at that moment in time, I'm thinking, as a teacher, all sorts of things could have happened from that moment. Now, if I was teaching a Year 9 class, I probably wouldn't have done it, because the reaction from a Year 9 class would have been very different. And so what we're going to try and do with you today is kind of do this little dance, I suppose, of uncertainty. And that's what going into the woods is about. That's what going into the forest is about. It's about taking risks and making these moment-to-moment decisions when you're not quite sure what's going to happen. I think one of the things that has been missing in some of these conversations about education, certainly down where we live, is what the point of it is. And in England, the Education Select Committee has just started an inquiry into, well, what is the point of education, what we're here for, why are we sending children to school in the first place? It's only about 300 years too late, this conversation. But we're starting to have it. Now, certainly my experience as a teacher in the classroom is that this is the purpose of education. This is what I've been led to believe, because I'm accountable only really for the test results of the children that I teach. I'm only really accountable for the fact that they'll follow a nice, easy line of data that goes in a straight line. Whether or not they could fly way above it is irrelevant, and if they fall below it, I'm in trouble. But generally speaking, why do we want to get kids through tests? What does that do in terms of creating a future? And if we look at the economic argument, we could make the case that actually all we're doing is making children extremely compliant. And we make them compliant so they won't question the status quo, they won't try and change anything, and they'll keep things pretty much the way they are, which will suit lots of people who are in positions of power. And then I suppose, picking up on what we talked about, or what we were talking about earlier, some people would say, well, no, we want more than this for our children. This is what we want. We want children who are happy, and we want children who are creative. I'm going to be a bit grinchy now and say that's not enough. You can be really, really creative and awful. The final solution was a creative strategy, but it wasn't a moral strategy. Does that make sense? So it's not enough for us to be getting children to just be creative. We've got to start thinking about something a bit deeper than that. And then happiness, if you speak to most parents will say, I just want my child to be happy. I want my child to come to school and be happy. I want them to have a happy life. Well, it's a bit hard to disrespect that Then they say, what level are they at? What grade are they going to get? How are they going to get there? How can I get them better? But really, children need to be taught what happiness actually is. And what we found is that the Harvard University have done a massive project across North America called the Making Caring Common Project. And what they found in that research is that most children equate happiness with either feeling good all the time, or achieving high academic success, or having lots of stuff, having lots of material possessions. And what all that does is feed addictive behaviours. Because if you want to feel good all the time and you want to have stuff, you become caught up in a cycle of chasing things that are ultimately fairly empty. And only 20% of the children they surveyed said that caring for others or having like a positive contribution to their communities or to their society would make them happy. And yet all the research, the psychological research into happiness, suggests that feeling valued, feeling part of the community and feeling like you're making a positive contribution is the secret to happiness, as well as being loved and those kinds of things. So I think we've got to sort of step beyond that as well and say, okay, well, they might be good things to aim for, but we've got to be a bit more wise than that. And we've got to start questioning the difference between intellect and wisdom. Because if we want children to be clever and pass tests, we're not necessarily creating wise children. And if we create wise children, then we give them the power to change the world. Now, to do that, we've got to make them feel that they can deal with uncertainty. And to make them feel they can deal with uncertainty, we've got to be able to model it. So we have to start creating pedagogical experiences for children that make them feel like a risk is worth taking, that they're safe to take it emotionally, but that they can't be certain what the outcome is going to be. And then how do we work with that? So I think if we are going to try and move towards that world where there's wisdom and energy and change, we've got to start equipping children with this belief that education and knowledge is just great now. Not because you're going to pass a test in 5 years' time, but what we're doing now in the classroom at this moment in time is wonderful. And every piece of knowledge that's ever been invented was because a human being was bothered and curious and excited enough to find something out. And we don't know it all yet either. In 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time, in 300 years' time, in 1,000 years' time, we'll look back at this time and think they were so unknowledgeable, they knew so little. And our children are the people who find it out. And what we tend to do with them in school is say, here's the knowledge in the world, you've got to learn it. We don't say to them, here's the knowledge we've got so far, and you're going to acquire so much more. And that's a much more powerful position to place children in. So giving them the capacity to find out, the capacity to research, the capacity to discover, to be autonomous and independent is absolutely vital in this. These are year two. They look like they're in a school hall, but actually they're in an archaeological dig in London. And they're finding possessions that people have left as they've fled their homes. And as part of this archaeological dig, they uncover the fact that they're looking at remnants from the Great Fire of London. Archaeology is quite a long word for a year two kid, but they can cope with it. We don't dumb things down for them. We build them up. So if we start thinking about what we get as teachers, because we're stupid and unreliable as teachers, governments don't trust us to write our own curriculums. They give us neat little packages, like an apple. They give us the apple. Some minister sits in Parliament and he goes, you know what, when I was at school, I loved Oxbow Lake formations. So we're going to put that on the curriculum. Michael Gove goes, oh, the Glorious Revolution, that's got to be in there. It goes on the curriculum. So I'm imagining that there's a minister out there who loves apples. And he said to us, or she said to us, apples is on your curriculum. And what they'll do then is they'll dumb it down for us because they don't trust us to really be able to deliver apples properly. So they'll say to us, what you need to do, and what we're going to test the children on, is whether or not they understand that the apple's a fruit and that it has a seed in the middle and that it grows on a tree and it can come in different colours and so on and so forth. It grows in temperate climates. And as teachers, sometimes we're our own worst enemies. Because what we do is we take that little list and we tick it off. Done seeds, done trees, done colour, tick, 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 covered apples, let's move on. Now there's so much more to the apple that we could look at. We could cut it in half. If you're a mathematician, you could see the golden ratio. If you're a scientist, a chemist, you might look at the peptides in the apple and the qualities that the interaction that those chemicals have with the human body and why it is an apple a day might keep the doctor away. We might look at it and say, why is it that in all the paintings that have come from Western traditions of the tree of knowledge, the fruit that Eve is taking is an apple? But in Eastern civilizations, in Eastern depictions of that story, it's a pomegranate. So how does our geography, the flora and fauna and climate impact upon our cultural icons and our religious symbols? And then why is it that an apple has become the symbol of knowledge? And why is knowledge dangerous? And why weren't we allowed to eat it in the first place? And why did Apple computers choose that as their logo? Not just an apple, but an apple with a bite taken out of it. Because they were saying knowledge is power and we can give it to you, here it is. Now these are really interesting things about apples that sometimes, because we're thinking about coverage and ticking off the boxes and getting through, we forget to ask. So I'm saying find the core in your curriculum. And find, I don't know why I did that. A little wobble. Oh, and their little flesh. I think I went on to an animation spree. Right. So looking at how curriculum is built, looking at how people, I suppose, put values into their mission statements, into the curriculums, I think you can do worse than look at the International Baccalaureate. The IB, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the IB, but it starts with the primary years programme, the PYP, from about 5 years old, through the middle years programme and up to the diploma that most people know about. And this is what they are aiming to do. This is the purpose of education for the International Baccalaureate. I put the best bits in red, well, the bits that I thought were the best bits in red. But the best bit of all is this bit at the end here, lifelong learners who understand that other people, with their differences, can also be right. Let's just think about the world we live in at the moment. If we understood that other people with their differences could also be right, how much better off would we be? How much more tolerant would we be? How much more capable would we be of understanding why certain horrendous situations have arisen? And I think as educators, as teachers, we've got a real responsibility to children to allow them to navigate those dilemmas, those grey areas, those areas where there's not necessarily a right and wrong. And I do a scheme of work on Jabberwocky. I've done it with primary school children and secondary school children. It translates across both. And we spend 6 weeks on Jabberwocky. It's only a short poem. It's not that I'm a slow reader. But what we do is we take this boy who's been sent out to face this monster. And we ask the question of why would somebody leave their home, the safety of their home, to go and face this terrifying creature? Why would that happen? And really, we're looking at refugees, aren't we? Why do people have to leave and face horrendous things? Why do they have to flee their home? The children come up with lots of different ideas for him. They decide maybe the Jabberwocky's blood or its eggs or its teeth will be a cure for a disease that struck the village, or it's attacked the village in the past and this is a revenge thing, or to protect the village. Anyway, he goes out there and it takes us a long time because we have to map the whole environment. He has to go on his long journey. We have to invest in him. The children love him. They do a massive ordnance survey map of the whole area. And eventually, he comes home. And he comes home to a rousing welcome from his family and from the village and the community. And he's got the Jabberwock's head and he's a hero. Until a messenger arrives from a rival tribe. And that messenger comes in and declares war on his village because to them, Jabberwock is a sacred creature. And suddenly the children who love this hero have got a choice to sacrifice him for the death penalty because of what he's done to the Jabberwock, or to go to war, or to try and find a diplomatic solution. And in my mind, that's how you teach the Palestine-Israeli conflict. That's how you teach any war situation. You remove it so that children are really engaged in the issue, and that it doesn't matter if some of them are Muslim and some of them are Jewish and some of them are whatever, because you're creating a safe fictional space for them to explore those issues in. And they'll make the connections, they'll find them. We've got an atomized, look at this picture, how some of this picture. This is kids learning to swim in the 1950s. is hilarious. Those poor little boys, you can see the gravel on the floor, it must be really painful. You can see, this is what we do to children all the time. We decontextualise their learning, we take it out of the experiential realm and we put it into a context in which it's dry and in which you've got gravel in your knees and you're thinking, wow, would anybody want to swim? That's awful. It's horrible. I've got terrible memories of learning to swim. And they've never felt the ocean and they've never really understood what it's like to feel and what it's like to be in the water. I think we do that to children far too much. We also do this to children. This is an experiment that I can't quite believe anybody got the ethical go-ahead to do, but basically, because it was fleas, I don't think anyone cared. And you can see it on YouTube, you can see the experiment, the film on YouTube. They did it to frogs as well. And what they did was they measured how high these creatures could jump, and then they put them in jars, and for the fleas, they only had to keep them in the jar for 24 hours. And for the rest of their lives, the fleas could only jump to the level of the lid of the jar. It's like it reprogrammed them, and the frogs were in there for a bit longer, reprogrammed them to only be able to leap that far. And in the fleas' case, when they had baby fleas, I don't quite know how that happens, but their children could only jump to the lid, to the height of the lid as well. It became an inherited trait. Now I think we've done that with children, with grading and with examining and with testing and with labelling, to say to them, this is where you're expected to be. We're not going to see how far you can jump, because this is just where you're expected to be. And I think we miss out on an awful lot of opportunity. I'm going to read this out to you because I know that you can't see it, but this is a child at age 11 writing, and he's writing in role as a social worker. And the reason he's a social worker is because we're reading a book, and in that book there's a boy and he needs care. He's neglected, he's turned to crime, he never goes to school, he's a problem, and now social workers are involved. He writes this, it's a 4-page report. Physical description of child. The child is classed as well underweight according to his BMI results based on the growth centile chart. His weight is 34 kilograms and his height is 5 foot 1 inches. Both are below the average height and weight for a child of Robert's age. The boy's local GP reports recurrent severe chest infections as well as certain spots of infected eczema around the leg and groin area. His childhood immunisations are not up to date. He has signs of dental decay, caries, and his 2 front teeth are missing. His typical diet consists of simple snacks. His personal hygiene appears poor. Robert is pale and his overall appearance suggests his general health is poor, and overall is a cause for concern. You'd be fairly impressed if a social worker wrote that. An 11-year-old child. And he's not, obviously, he's a capable writer, but he's not writing that because he likes writing. He's writing that because he likes Robert. And it's finding the purpose, it's finding the point for a child to put pen to paper that really drives excellence in writing. And if you can find that purpose for children, they fly. So we're going to go into the forest in a moment, but before we do, I just want to share with you a little bit of a speech. And this speech is by Carl Sagan. I don't know if any of you have heard of Carl Sagan. He was an astronaut with NASA, one of the best astronauts they ever had. And in 1977, NASA sent out the Voyager space probe, and it was the first space probe that had taken photos from, well, it went beyond our solar system, but it was the first space probe that had gone right across the solar system and taken photographs of all the planets on the way. And as it reached the very outer edges of the solar system, he persuaded NASA to turn Voyager around and to take a photo of Earth. And that's it. That little dot there, it's so small that we had to put an arrow on it. That's Earth from the edges of the solar system. And then he wrote this. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being that ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor, explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner, how frequent their misunderstandings, how eager to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. It's been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There's perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceit than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we'll ever know. And I think that's the purpose of education. If we each went back into our classrooms tomorrow and said, where is it that we teach how to deal kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish and be responsible for the home that we've got, we'd have a very different looking curriculum, I think. And it doesn't take a lot to change what you already do to place that at the heart of it. So how do we do that? Well, we take children on journeys, we take them into the forest, we show them that there are multiple pathways. I'm going to take you into a forest now. And Hal's going to kind of set you up in just a moment. But I'd just like to leave you with this thought. And I'd just like to replace the word physics with education. There's obviously a safeguarding issue here, so I wouldn't share it with children. We get results out of education. We get test results, we get exam results, we get accountability. But that's not why we do it. And why we do it is to build a world that's a little bit more exciting for children. So are you prepared to go into the forest? Because that's what we're going to do.
Hello. Hello everyone. It's very nice to be here. Thanks, Deborah. Should we give Deborah a clap? If it's all right now, we're going to go into the forest, and all you're going to need, perhaps with you, is a pen. And that's the only incongruous thing we're going to have. And I don't want you to worry about it. I don't want you to think, oh no, it's going to humiliate us, or there's going to be some dancing. It's none of that. We're just gonna move elsewhere. And I want you to go along with it. Is it all right if we just go along with it? And is it all right if we just see the good? See the good. And whilst we're doing this, and we're going to move through this, I just want you to try and think, well, what does this mean to me? And really, the creative conversation we started, 20 minutes ago. It's ongoing in your reflections as we're going through things. And we're going to do some stuff, and then we're going to come back, and we're just going to share some final things, if that's okay. And then it's wine and stuff. So, if it's all right, we need to just we're going to go and see a really big tree. It's been there for centuries. It's always been there. Okay, I've discovered when I'm saying to kids, is that all right? They'll just go, yeah. It's fine. So that's great that you're doing that as well. So with as little fuss as possible, we need to just sort of stand and be ready to go. So put your books and notes and sheets to one side, and plates and vol au vents. And please stand if everyone's comfortable standing. And the thing now is we're at the edge and we're prepared. We know the year is 1580. So if it's 1580, can you just tell the person next to you what we won't have? Great, I'm glad we've got that sorted out. And by just having that little conversation and framing that up with the children, it's a way of just helping them. It's protecting them into thinking about the past. So it's fun. And we write a list of what we don't have, like KFC with a Greggs, which is on the roundabout. You're right, we don't have that. So we're going to go in. If we're What are we wearing? Just tell the person what you've got on. Just like that. What have you got on? What have you got with you? That's the conversation stopped. It's also the lantern. Should we have a lantern? Or some sort of light? Something that can help us through?
Because it's quite dark, and in fact it's so early that the sun's not come up yet. It's really early in the morning. In fact, we always get up quite early, but we've had to get up super early today. And we're going to see this tree.
We're going to go see the tree. So the tree is over here. Can you see it? It's huge. Come on, let's go and stand around the tree. Have you seen how tall it is? This tree has been here. Have you seen it? Touch it if you want.
How do we know how long a tree's been here? Sorry, say that again. The rings on the inside. The rings?
Yeah.
So we'd have to chop it down to count the rings. Seems a bit extreme. How else do you think we might be able to find out how old this tree is? How high it is, yeah?
People writing
the
about
height.
it. People writing about it.
People might have written about it. There might be stories about this tree going back for a long time. And of course, when we've done this with children, we've done it in lots of different contexts. We can share some of those with you later. They come up with lots of different ideas, and one of them is, let's go and look at some pictures of really old trees on Google, and then measure how big this tree is, and see how they compare. So what I sometimes do is scatter things like oak leaves or acorns around. If they know it's an oak, and they'll go and look it up. The children will get meter sticks, or they'll get string, and they'll measure it, and then they'll go onto the internet and have a look. So imagining we've done all that, and we've done that little bit of research, and we've done some maths around it, and we may well have looked at the height of the tree, and then figured out look at ratio and proportion, and try and think things that way. We'd get an idea that this tree has been around, but there's a clue behind you on the timeline. So if we look at this long piece of
Poundland masking tape.
Sophisticated timeline. We can see that up at this end is 2015, and about here is 1580, which is where we're going to go into our story. So if we look at the length of that piece of paper, and we say that the other end of it was the beginning of the tree, what date would you put on that end? And be thinking, is this maths? Is it history? What is it?
800.
800? Yeah, because we reckon that amount of time is roughly about 500 years, isn't it?
Yes.
So how many years would be down there? Would everyone be happy to agree that it was about 800 AD that this tree was put up there?
I can get one. Yeah, I can get one.
All right. And some Post-it notes, is that all right?
Yeah, I'll go there.
So what we're going to do, we're going to give you all a Post-it note, actually probably working in groups of 3 or 4 to speed things up a little bit. And I want you to think about, we'll write 800 AD down at the bottom there. What things have happened between 800 AD and 2015 that this tree would have seen? And then put them on the timeline according to where you think they are in terms of sequence of events. So what has this tree seen since 800 AD?
We reckon it was like about
The
tree line is
when we do this timeline thing with kids, they know about happens up here. And then they might have a few things down here, but generally speaking, it opens up a conversation about how history is gathered and recorded. And we start to say, why do we know so much more about these times than those times? We start to look at things like when the printing press was invented and when people started writing, and certainly the advent of television and radio and how that made news much more available to people. And we start to get a sense of the fact that actually this is still a relatively short amount of time in terms of, if I say to them, how long would this piece of masking tape have to be if we went all the way around to the dinosaurs? How long would that be? Or the beginning of the Earth, or the Big Bang, how long would that be? We start to get a sense of scale. But what we're doing really is building investment in the tree. Because now they see that blimey, this tree has been here and witnessed an awful lot of stuff. Now in our story, we're going to just be here. So we're only here at the life point of this tree. If this tree carries on living, we will see all this stuff happen. And if it doesn't carry on living, it'll end there in 1580. And we're going to decide what happens to this tree. So I'm just going to ask for about 15 volunteers at the moment to just offer to stand with the backs to the tree. And come and stand with your back to the tree if you can really think in your head of something that tree might have witnessed at some point in its history. And so all I want is a brave group of people to take the road less travelled by and join in the tree. And we're just going to go around this circle and we're going to hear the tree tell us about its experiences in its life.
The fall of the Berlin Wall.
Hanging of a witch.
First man in the moon.
The growth of farming and housing development.
Suffragettes. A local market and fair.
Hanging clearances. Birth of Shakespeare.
Massacre of Glencoe.
Oh, you mixed mine. No, Shakespeare was, that was it. Oh, lots of lovely poetry written by lots of Renaissance poets. Oscar Wilde, etc.
The Blitz.
I've seen Haley's comment many times.
Lots of people have claimed that oh, lovely, thank you very much, and just relax. And what we do with the children then is we build that more. So we're like, did the tree really see the man land on the moon? Can the trees see that far? And they might say, yeah, they can. Trees have got really, really good eyesight. They can see all the way to the moon. So in which case, what did you see?
And another thing, in terms of building investment, it's like it might be a question we might ask is, how has this tree been known? What is it called? What is it called today in 1580? And certainly in some of the work with smaller children, it's what would you like to call the tree? The tree of. And we'd ask them that. And all it is building the investment in it. And we talk about the fact that we love the tree. And the tree is very important to us in 1580.
So we're going to go into our story now, and we are in 1580, and this tree is in a wood that's very close to where we live, to our village, and we all work for the person who owns this wood. In fact, we live on his land. We're tenant farmers and tenant workers, and our families and ourselves depend on being able to live and work for this man. And we're going to meet him. And the reason we're here so early this morning is because he's asked us to do a job for him. And here he is. Let's see if we like him or not.
I'm on an arse. Let's say I'm on an arse. Good you're here. As we are busy. The work starts today. And are you keen? Are you willing?
Yes.
Are you willing?
Yes.
Good. The king has bequeathed to me this land. I'm instructing you.
Maybe he'd like a big tree in his back garden.
A beautiful big tree.
So maybe we need to think about what kinds of benefits this tree might bring to him if it was in his garden.
I mean, I think this tree, the seeds from this tree, this whole wood was grown from this tree, I reckon.
Yeah.
So if we cut this tree down, we'll have no more wood.
This is the daddy.
This is the big daddy mummy tree. And if we can persuade him that we could, use the younger trees and not cut down the big daddy tree.
Is old oak better than young oak? Would it make a better... What kind of oak do you think would make a better door? I don't know. Maybe we need to find out. Do you see where we're going with this? Yeah? I don't know. We'd better find out. But what you've done as a class and what the kids do as a class is come up with 100 solutions to give to him so we don't have to chop this tree down. Now we're going to fast forward in time because we haven't got time to get through everything.
And he's back to fast forward. Look.
And not only does he want the tree cutting down now, but he's got another idea.
I have had an epiphany. The tree, and there will be a reward, a fine reward for the cutters of this tree who can enable it to fall. I don't know if you can see. I know you know it's there. The old derelict Catholic church just there. Can you see it? No one's been there for years. If you can make it fall on that, that will be splendid.
You want the tree to fall on a church?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Right.
Good.
Okay.
Hurrah!
So now we've not only got the tree to be responsible for, but is it right to destroy a church? He says it's derelict, but we don't know for sure. We're going to have to go inside and see. And where are we in time in terms of Catholics and Protestants and churches and so on and so forth? Not very popular at all. He doesn't care if the tree's going to fall on the Catholic Church. But when we go into that church, and we've got kind of too many people to do it properly. But what we do is we get the children each to have a post-it note and they label up the church. And what we find is that there are still lots of artefacts in this church. There's an altar, there are still candelabras, there's a whole host of statues and icons and pictures in this church. And there's one post-it note. And on that post-it note it says, breadcrumbs and a half-drunken cup of wine. And what does that suggest?
It's still being used.
It's still being used, and that there's somebody using this space, perhaps even living in this space. And so now we've not got just responsibility for a tree, but we've got responsibility potentially for a human being. And we might have to decide whether or not we protect that human being, or whether or not we sacrifice him and hand him over and betray him. So I think we need to meet him and find out a little bit more. Now, what we've got, a highly sophisticated picture.
We can email this to you.
It's a portrait of a Catholic priest. And the children can ask this Catholic priest the portrait of a Catholic priest, so that it doesn't have to be him himself, but again, you're asking the picture, what has the picture witnessed in this space, what is happening in this space? And they can ask him a question. So just turn to the person next to you and think about what would you want to ask this portrait of the priest, if you can speak to him. Who'd like to ask the first question?
Would you be happy if we were to chop down this tree, destroy your church, but we'll build you a new church at a more desirable location? Would that be alright? With some of the wood. So it's kind of a slightly more mahogany feel to it.
Now you're talking.
No.
Can I ask? You're the Catholic priest, yes? Can I ask, do you have faith?
I have faith.
Well, is your faith strong enough to withstand whatever happens to you because it's God's will?
Yes.
So we can do it or not. You know.
Oh, that's all right, we're off the hook.
Let it fall. Let it fall. Do you know that idea of the portrait? So when you do that with children, some children have never experienced that before. If you say, would you like to ask the portrait some questions? They go, oh, no, that's impossible. But you can do anything. You can do anything, can't you? And the statue, ask the statue the question. The statue that was put there hundreds of years before, let's ask the statue some questions. Let's ask the tree. Let the tree speak. And then have someone coming in to observe going, what are you doing?
It may feel like what we just did was very primary. I have done historical investigation through the tree with secondary as well. It goes down really well with secondary kids. But the point is that you're creating moral dilemma, and it's the moral dilemma that's the beating heart of what we do. Now, I've had this tree, and we found fragments of writing on parchment with lines from Midsummer Night's Dream on it, and we've had fairy dust, and suddenly we're in the world of Shakespeare, and we're in the forest of Midsummer Night's Dream. I've used it for Jabberwocky, and it's been the Tum-Tum tree. He stands a while in uffish thought, waiting for the Jabberwock to arrive, and we've got this tree standing there. You can use it for the Lorax, the Truffalo tree. You know, it doesn't have to be about the Reformation or Tudor times. It could be any tree at any time. But the idea is there's a dilemma beating at the heart of it. And here we had one. Again, this was year 4. And we were an animal rescue team. We specialised in dangerous animals. And we'd had a request from the Ural Mountains in Russia, because Russia was suddenly on the curriculum for year 4. So, oh, damn, we did Africa last year, now we're going to do Russia. And the children had a request from a woman who lived in the forest, and who was worried about the wolves, that the wolves she felt were being culled and blamed for this child who disappeared, and she felt there was something wrong, there was something not quite right about what was happening. She asked us to investigate to see if we could rescue the wolves. We spent a long time planning this trip to Russia. We had to budget it, we had to map it, we had to figure out how we were going to get there, we had to learn a bit of Russian. And eventually we get to Russia, and the children then have to try and ascertain what's happened. This is a squirrel that we interviewed from the local forest. She's going, I'm no fan of wolves, me. I'm no fan of wolves. She said, I'm a bit frightened of them, but I tell you now, that wolf did not touch that child. So we got her witness, we got an eagle's eyewitness account, because our map was a bit rubbish, and the forest that the wolves were in was just a green splodge on the map. What the children needed was a really detailed map with all the footpaths in it, the rocks, the caves, the potential places that we might find these creatures. And we're standing on the edge of the forest. Eventually, it's taken us ages to get there. Standing on the edge of the forest, there's a little crowd of children and me, and I'm saying we're about to go into the forest. What are we hoping to find? Toys! It's like, we might be hoping to find toys. If we were children, but we're not, we're adults, we're animal investigators. What would adults be hoping to find in this forest? A nightclub! Right, I know what your parents are up to at the weekend. So that was our Into the Forest, but our stewardship was about protecting the wolves and the habitat, and what they found and discovered through that inquiry was that the mining community and the habitat, and what they found and discovered through that inquiry was that the mining community had encroached on wolf habitat so much they'd been crowded into a small space, and the mine wanted to expand even further, and this was all a ruse really to get the wolves out of it. So then, how do we create a sanctuary for wolves? Where would we move them to? There have been, and there was the opportunity to bring them to Scotland, to relocate to Scotland, and there have been, so we had to do an autopsy. We found a dead wolf. Unfortunately, we had to do an autopsy. We found a dead wolf. Unfortunately, We'd Skyped his baby, I had a puppet and a cardboard box, and here's a wolf cub, and I put this puppet in the cardboard box, and we're Skyping, and here's a wolf cub, who speaks dog, and 26 hands dog, and a 27th because I speak giraffe, and don't need to talk to a giraffe today. But the little wolf cub tells us that his dad's missing. The children went away on Friday, and he's not coming back. And unfortunately, they find his body. The children are experts and they want to do the autopsy. They don't with their imagination. They're wolf experts and they want to do the autopsy. And with their imaginations in a clear plastic bag, they take the contents out of the wolf's stomach and put it into the plastic bag, and they tell us what. We'll have to do further investigation. We're not sure if it's this is how you build animal fur. We'll have to send it to the lab. We'll have to do further investigations. This is how you build fur. He's going to hand it to his own.
That's it.
I'm going to hand on his heart. He's going to take it into his own.
So that was a really lovely idea, and we've obviously just rushed. So that was a really lovely idea, and we've obviously just rushed through. I'll stop that now. But we've just rushed through that to try and share some principles with us. I hope you can see them. This is year 6, so quite explicit. Here's a different forest, and this is year 6, so that this is doing. They've been doing. You know, like we do city centre. We do the Egyptians. And they've been doing. We do the Romans. They've been doing. You know, like we do. We do the Egyptians. We've got to do that. We do the Romans, then we cut it short because of Christmas. We've got to do that. Doing the Gothic. And I just thought that was such a brilliant. They're doing Gothic. And I just think that's subject. I just thought that was such a brilliant. Rich. You can suck everything into the subject topic. Where we can pull everything in. And the first thing I'm core, you can suck everything into that. And I went into the class, and the first thing I'm confronted with is a wall display with 2 green arms coming out. The monster breaking through. We're going on to Jekyll and Hyde. So I just had I was modelling this just going on to. We're going on to Jekyll and Hyde. So I just had I was modelling this just to some teachers. The work I do is, and Debra does it. We'll do this with the kids, and we've got the teachers there. So it's CPD on steroids. So you've got teachers going. And we've got the kids there, and so we go into the forest, and I did the same with these children. So they're all going. And let's say it's 1898. Yeah, they know the significance. Is that okay? Yeah, and they're all like, yeah. And 1898 is a significant year. They know the significance of that. We go into the forest. We figure out what we need to take, and we travel in. So I'll just show you these really quickly. We go into the forest. We've just figured out what we need to take, and we travel in. So I'll just show you these really quickly because it's we've just done that as grown-ups, and these are the children. So he's got his lantern. The power of photography. She just said, "I'm going to be an arse." Capturing the moments. I'm going to be an arse. He's got his lantern. Okay. She just said, "I'm going to be an arse." I'm going to be an arse. That's Angela. I said, "Okay." We travelled in, and she always wanted to be the woodcutter, and she's got a lantern. So we travelled in, and they showed me what we go in because we've got to go and find the house. Let's see what lies doing. We're going to travel in. We've got to go in because we've got to go and find the house that lies in the centre of the buyer from abroad. Find the house. It'll be in a rightness, but the buyer from abroad who's wanted to purchase the property, so already we need to produce for him a truthful report. I'm trying to build. So already, and we know what we're doing, but I'm trying to build the investment. We find the house, which we just talked about. The reason to write. So we find the house eventually. There's the house. And little Liam, and I want you to picture Liam. Much There's the house. And little Liam, and I want you to picture Liam. He's like this. And I say, Liam, he's constantly in a there. And he's going in. And I say, Liam, are you alright? And he went, I'm not going in there. I'm not going in. I went, right, Liam, maybe you can do the report the grounds. And he went, maybe you can write down just everything's an exclamation mark. It's not really a garden. I went, maybe you could write down what I can map out what's outside. It's not really a garden, is it? And then he went, I can see a shed over there. Can you? Which was going to be a shed. And then he went, and he went off to the reading area, which was going to be the shed and so on. Now we found the abandoned house, and we said, right, we've got to go in.
He was enjoying
So
it.
Alfie is a
Said,
naughty
Alfie,
boy.
you're going to come with me
I'd
in
say,
the house.
class
And when he first saw that picture,
but he was
this is
enjoying
what he
this.
said. Now, this
So I said,
Alfie's
Alfie, you're
ten.
going to come with
This
me
is
in the
what he
house.
did.
Now, when he first saw that picture, this is what he said. Now, this Alfie's 10. This is what he did. And that is some received wisdom. Practically doing that. And that is some received wisdom. Received language. I don't know. He was practically doing that. It was practically that. So I said, I've got Alfie and L. It was practically that. So I said, I've got Alfie, and he is a little wise boy, and he's funny.
We
and
haven't
so
got
on.
a key.
And a bit
We've got to
naughty.
force
So
it
we got to open the door.
So we need
And
a big creep.
we haven't
I
got
just
a
want you to
key.
join in.
We've got to force it open.
Can you just creep?
We were told that.
As appropriate.
So we need a big creep.
Finish with the
And I
foot.
just want you to join
Is that
in.
alright? So
Can you just creep
Come on, Alfie, and so we're pushing
as appropriate and finish with a thud? Is that alright? So, come on, Alfie, and so we're pushing to for a Friday. Let's just do it one more time. That's pretty good actually for a Friday. Let's just do it one more time. And we walked in. Alfie. A tiger. And we walked in. Alfie. I didn't want him to say that, did I? A tiger. It's the same as the kids say now. A tiger. I didn't want him to say that, did I? And it's the same as the kids say nightclub. And you're thinking, I'm just trying to build
a tiger.
this. And
Really?
I know
Some
you're not
kids
doing it
get
really
really
excited, so
excited.
maybe you
Tiger
are.
loose in the
I went, a tiger! Really? And some of the kids get really excited that there's a tiger loose in the house and you might get eaten. I said, is it really a tiger? He went, no, it's a rug. There's as far as you know, one of those rugs? We won't be all 1970s. So there's as far as we talked about anyway. And we all went into rooms then.
Even though it was a mess.
And we talked about what we might find.
Things
And
in there.
the house
And you can
was
see
still,
the
even though it was a
theme.
mess,
Just done this with
there
the
was
church.
still artifacts and things
this
in
different-
there.
and they
And you can
found
see
the
the theme.
portrait
They're saying we've just done this with the church.
And they
But
thought,
this is different. And they found the portrait of a really happy man.
there's someone really happy.
And they thought, the house is really sad.
We asked him, and we went.
And
into
there's
that.
someone really
And
happy
we asked
in the
portrait.
painting.
And I'll speak as the portrait.
Should we ask him?
Is that
And
okay?
we went into that. And we asked the portrait. And
I'll
I'll
speak
speak
as the
portrait.
And,
that
and I
okay?
just love that photo because there's one of
And
the
that's
observing teachers.
thing.
That kid.
And I just love that photo because there's one of the observing teachers. That kid was practically, and he told me,
He
this,
just
and
get on
he
me.
practically was saying to him,
trying to help me.
"Can you just let me alright?" He just said again, I'm sort of milling around instead of interrupting me and trying to help me.
And they map
I'm alright.
They're drawing. They're doing.
And I'm just sort of milling around at the front because they're on, and they're mapping here, they're drawing, they're doing a floor map of each room and labelling it up. Now this isn't a long exercise, and it's not just doing a drawing or making a poster. We need this.
Now Liam,
And we're going to connect it all together
He's
so we
there
have a real
doing the
idea
garden.
on what we've got in the house.
he came
Now
up with the
Liam,
shed. He said the shed. Then he
he's
said
there
there's a stable.
doing the garden.
Tell me about the stable.
He came up with the shed. He
it's full
said
of
the
dead
shed.
horses.
Then he said there's a stable. I said, tell me about the stables.
Sure about
He said it's full of dead horses.
Alright, skeletons.
And I was thinking, I'm sure about that.
Because it's a
And he looked at me and went, alright, skeletons. She came to like that. I went, skeletons is better because it's a bit more gothic.
So he was
came to
buzzing,
life,
he also
that'd
said
be even
pet
better.
cemetery, and he was going off on some really dark places. Which is
So he was
probably
buzzing. He also
appropriate.
said pet cemetery, and he was
And we
going
began
off
then.
on
We
some
moved
really
to-
dark places, which is probably appropriate.
We moved to our books.
And we began then. We moved to paper. We moved to
foreign
writing.
buyer.
We moved to our books, and we started writing the truthful
So they're writing
report
these lovely
for the
reports.
foreign
So not like an
buyer
estate
of the
agent's
property.
report, but a truthful.
And so they're writing these lovely reports. So not like an estate agent
kind of report.
but a truthful.
And so and they've been doing
Needs a lot
report
of
writing the week
kind of
before,
report.
so now we're just going to use those skills.
And so
And then we got a letter.
and they've been doing
A
report
letter
writing
arrived.
the week before. So now we're just
The
going to use
authentic
those skills.
faith.
And then we got a letter.
Faith.
A letter
The
arrived.
thing that I've just.
The
Kid said,
authentic
you've just
faith.
written
Remember
that.
that? The
I said,
authentic
yeah,
faith.
All right with you?
The real, the thing that I've just. A kid said, "You've just written that." And I said, "Yeah, I have. Is that all right with you?"
Open it. Open it and read it.
Yeah.
Open it. Open it and read it.
Kids like,
Because I don't like Dracula. This and Alfie went, right, we're burning it down. We're burning it
They don't
down.
like Dracula.
Burn it down.
We're not. Alfie went, right, we're burning it down. We're burning it down. Burn it down. We're not wanting to help the vampire because they've read Dracula, and suddenly this was a revelation and a dilemma. What are we going to do? Oh, that's curriculum. Is that okay? I just wanted to and I'll show you just another quick one, just to show you. Oh, that's curriculum. Any curriculum, what you said, just a document. There's curriculum to me. It's cold and dead. Any curriculum is just a document. It's not even a document. It's something you download from the cloud. And that's just picking up on what Debra said. We are the people who breathe life into it and humanise it, and that's just picking up on what Debra said. With our older kids, and I do a lot of work in special setting in Key Stage with our older kids, and we do this sort of work. We don't call it drama. We don't say. We never say pretend. We just say let's say in the special school, and they're waiting for it. It's part of the learning routine now. In our curriculum, in the special school in Barnsley and South Yorkshire. We've got to do Shakespeare. So how are we going to do Shakespeare? And we talk a lot about how do we hold back the nettles. So we've got to do Shakespeare. So how are we going to do Shakespeare? We can't just go in with the text. We need to protect the children a little bit into it. So it's kind of holding back the nettles and maybe clearing the path, which is what we've been doing this afternoon. That was. Do you want to talk about that just quickly?
Just, again, the forest in action.
No, okay, and
really want to timeline and use this story, but I don't think we need to.
No, okay, and the thing is, we've just focused on the forest. So we could have done the inside the pyramid. And the thing is, we've just focused on the forest. We could have done the inside the pyramid. We could have done the asteroid. We could have done the desert. We could have done the space station. We could have done the asteroid. And it's a sense of place. And sometimes we can't take our children to those places, isn't it? And it's a sense of place. And sometimes we can't take our children to those places, but in the classroom, I just wanted to show you this because this was nurture. You doing your work, I'm sure, as well. We can. These are year 2. And I just wanted to show you this because this was nurture. So these are the year 2 class in a mainstream school. So these are children who are special needs, 6-year-olds. The nurture class in a mainstream school. So these are children who are special needs. There are behaviour issues. Fairy tales. And there are some children who just haven't had a good start. And they've been doing fairy tales. Oh, we're good with that, aren't we? Some of you have got a warm feeling now, haven't you? I showed this to a PE teacher. So we go to a forest, but look at this forest. Can I go there? I showed this to a PE teacher, and he just went forest, and I did exactly the same thing. Can I go there? And there's the forest, and I did exactly the same thing. I just said 15:30. If it's 15:30, random kind of. 15:30, Xbox. What don't we have? And they came up with the list and we wrote it up. So we knew what we couldn't say. Xbox. And I said, let's say we live in the forest. And they came up with the list and we wrote it up. So we knew what we couldn't say. And I said, let's say we live in the forest. No! Shall we? James. Apart from James who did this. No! James, butter won't melt. He's got a smile, he's playing with his watch there. I've got teachers watching me going like this. Yeah, deal with James. And I'm thinking, I've got teachers watching me going like this. Yeah, deal with James. James. If we live in the village in the forest, what jobs need doing? Let's say we live in the village. Tell the person next to you now the job. If we live in the village in the forest, what jobs need doing? Just tell someone next to you. Just tell the person next to you now the jobs that need doing. Very quickly. Turn around. We haven't got time for that. We haven't got time. But I'm sure he said woodcutter or baker. We haven't got time for that. We haven't got time. But I'm sure he said woodcutter or baker. Did you say? Imogen said, "What do you do?" I'm a berry checker. And she looked at me and I knew. She went, "What do you do?" I check berries. And she looked at me and I knew the ridiculous question I'd just asked. She went, "You don't check them properly." I check berries. I said, "Go to Charlotte. What happens if you don't check them properly?" And she said, "Great." And Charlotte, James, we've all got jobs. I'm the doctor. No, I was just great. What other jobs? James, we've all got jobs. No. I'm a fire starter. What other jobs need doing? And all the adults were like, really said a lot. Just said, I'm a fire starter. And I said, show me. And all the adults were like, twisted fire starter. And I said, show me. Show me the fire starter. And he just got on his knees and did that. And I just thought that was brilliant. It was brilliant. I mean, the act of a desperate teacher now. And James, pick up your bow and arrow. Come with me. We're going hunting. The act of a desperate teacher now. And James, pick up your bow and arrow and come with me. We're going hunting. Confident. Don't look back. Don't look back. And I said, not that arrow. Are you there, James? And I felt him there. And I said, not that arrow. Now, use your good arrow. And I felt him move. Playtime, just teach us about. And it was great. Now, at the interval, at the break, at the playtime, just teach us about the act of desperate teachers. At the end of their tether, in the moment. It was the act of desperate teachers. At the end of their tether, in the moment. What on earth am I going to do? And I drew away. Do you know? Have you been on that? Have you been on that course? You just took your jet. Walking away. Do you know? Have you been on that? Have you been on that course? You just took my fault. We had it on a Monday. I remember having that course as a secondary teacher, and my form, we had it on a Monday, and on a Tuesday, my form at lunchtime came into the classroom and said, "Sir, it's like this Wyler lad said, sir, they're all saying it's like invasion of the body snatchers. They're all saying thank you. I haven't done anything yet." That was me then. And it just worked, and then James became he went from not inducted in to absolutely being invested in, to being obsessed in it. And the other thing we did was we named the trees. What's that tree if we had time, James named his the tree of shadows. I would draw on that and say, well, what's your and if we had time, we would have done some writing. I would draw on that and say, well, what's your tree? And what other names has it been known as? And then the news came. And all this, going back to what we've done, is about the building of investment. And then the news came. Tech fans. No child in the room said, excuse me, this is incongruous to the narrative you've been presenting. No child in the room had said, excuse me. James said, yeah, he eats everybody. He eats everybody, the wolf. And James said, yeah, he eats everybody. He eats everybody, the wolf.
No one's gone missing.
I was saying, is that true? Is that?
No.
I know he's naughty, but I've not seen. No one's gone missing, have they? But there's one way to find out.
No.
Let's go and listen in at Wolf Tree. But there's one way to find out. We're going to go to Wolf Tree. Let's go and listen in at Wolf Tree. Should we go to Wolf Tree? If we're going to go to Wolf Tree, we have to walk carefully.
At the tree. So we went to listen.
The wolf lives in the hedge at the base of the tree. So we went to listen. Do you want to hear what the wolf said?
Because he's only got a quiet voice. Lean in. Maybe cup your ear. Because he's only got a quiet voice. So I've not gone down the fancy dress shop. Right, I'll talk as the wolf. I've not said look. So I've not gone down the fancy dress shop. Right. So I've not said look. I've had drama training. I'm going to go into the role. So everyone needs to be quiet. I'll just prepare. I've lived as a wolf. I'll talk as the wolf. All right. Listen. Listen. Everybody runs away. I have no friends. Everybody runs away. I have no friends. I even had to send the family away. To France. I even had to send the family away. Foreign languages curriculum. Obviously I didn't say that. 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 But later when I was chatting to the teachers, they were saying, you could have sent your family to France and then we could send letters in French. But we have tension, which is the dilemma. You could. The dilemma brings that tension. But we have tension, which is the dilemma. The dilemma brings that healthy tension, which is safe. None of it's real. And none of the kids are walking out thinking it's real. We're not lying. This isn't one of those wow events. This is just, we've just listened in. And again, this is the reaction. Happy to share it. And again, I can send you this resource. Happy to share it. That was the tree that we were all sneaking to. But those are the questions on the post-it notes from the children. That's a little boy. That's James saying, can I show you my work? Isn't it? That's a little boy. That's James saying, can I show you my work? Isn't it? Isn't it? That's a little boy saying, I've got some work. Would you like what are you going to give the wolf, Imogen? Some berries. Would you like what are you going to give the wolf, Imogen? Some berries. How do we feel? That's a good word. That's more than sad. That's a good word. What are we going to That's do? More than sad. And what are we going to do? And James said, I think, James we need to go and speak to him. So I said, right, okay. And James said, James we need to go and speak to him. So I said, right, okay. What are you going to say? So we went up to the tree. We had help James. The little boy said, what's he going to say to the wolf? And I went, that's okay. Could you guard? So we went up to the tree. We had this big thing, and the little boy said, I don't want to go back to the tree. And I went, that's okay. Could you guard the town? And he went, yeah, all right. So I stood him here. It was fine. So James approached, and he hadn't listened to anyone. Stand by. Hello. So James approached, and he hadn't listened to anyone. He just did this. Made it. Hello. I, in the moment, made a huge error. Two girls. I roared. James said, "F this." And I was James said, "F this." And I was left standing there like this, thinking, "Oh no, I've ruined everything." And then I said, "Sometimes we make mistakes, don't we, girls?" And that was one. It's all right, girls, come back. And then I said, "It's okay, there'll be girls, go back." And they were fine. Girls, James, it's all right, girls, come back. James, I'm gonna help, yeah. Girls, and they were fine. So James, you're gonna come back. He was like, "No, James, I'm gonna help. Let's say something else." So James came back after some cajoling and much relief from me. And he stepped forward. We had two lads next to him. And the wolf. And he said, came out of the hedge. We come in peace. And the wolf came out of the hedge and extended a paw. As a tear fell from his eye. Where's the curriculum? What have we taught? And that's the nature of the word. Where's the teach knowledge and skills? What have we taught? But then perhaps we need to. And that's the nature of the word. We need to give. So we teach knowledge and skills. But then perhaps we need to place them somewhere. We need to give the children space to play sort of approach. And I used to, like Debra, I used to use Key Stage 3 and 4, 12 years sort of approach. The signing up of a space. The first time I ever did that was probably about 12 years ago, teaching To Kill a Mockingbird. We just labelled we had to go to him and make him feel better. And then we'd have a chair with Atticus Finch labelled on it. And then we had to go talk to him and make him feel better. I must show you. He's lost the case. He was cracking. And there is James. And I must show you him. So what are the possibilities? I think you can sense it, you can see it, and maybe. So what are the possibilities? I think you can. You can sense it, you can see it, and maybe thinking of what you're doing in your setting. Where's the richness that needs mining? Where are the golden moments that we can have that perhaps aren't? They're not part of a bullet point on a coverage document. They're just important. All it takes is a bit of pre-planning. As teachers, I work with new teachers. All it takes is a bit of pre-planning. With new teachers. Sometimes as teachers, I work with new teachers. I'm sure you do as well. When we work with new teachers, new teachers just want the magic tricks. They want the magic bean. Educational things. And actually, what they need to do is they need to be allowed to develop as thinkers, as educational thinkers, and they can imagine what they'd like to do with their children, and how that experience can just cover the curriculum almost by accident. And that's what I mean by Imagineering. It's the pre-planning. It's the thing we do before we engineer. In Bradford, what they did in one school, they got a young teaching assistant. In Bradford, what they did in one school, they got a young teaching assistant, dressed him as Gollum in a loincloth. Some would say it was inappropriate. And they gave him a paper mache head and put him in a cupboard. And the trick was, what happened, the head read out the mundane notice, and there was a trigger word, which was a signal for Gollum to leap out of the cupboard. And there was total meltdown. And kids were grabbing their it was sisters, phoning parents. It made the auxiliary post. It was tricking kids. It was lying. It was lying. And I could see the teachers planning that and thinking, this is going to be brilliant. And they had the best intentions.
So, but this work is about lying, embellish that, and sometimes it can work meltdown. So, this work isn't about lying, and sometimes it can work that sort of work. I know it can, and I've seen it just in the special school. I do a lot of work with. This is different to that. And if we just in the special school, I do a lot of work with. We looked at this book, the little book, this big stuff about the brain, which I'm sure I've name checked with you before. Actually, it's brilliant, and it's a brilliant explanation of how children's brains work, and for the hard work. What we have to do with the kids who can't cope, and so I really recommend it. And if kids, what we have to do with the kids who can't cope because their behaviour is too extreme in mainstream, what we have to do with those children is build the botheredness around the curriculum. We have to make them care about what's going to happen next, and that's where a narrative or an episodic and it helps the kids plan can really support that. Well, I don't know if it's the same. And it helps the kids' imagination full of kids doing GCSE. Well, I don't know if it's the same in Scotland, but I'd just have a room full of kids doing GCSE, and I'd say, I'd be on my chair doing Dead Poets Society, and a kid would say, "Sir, just get off the chair and tell us what you need to know." So I get off the chair, my mum says I can get a tattoo. So how do I get off the chair and I then spoon feed him, spoon feeding him, because that's where he's happiest. So how do we keep the active seeking brain going?
I'm sorry if it's gone on a bit too long. I know some of you need to go.
So we hope that you've... and I'm sorry if it's gone on a bit too long. I know some of you need to go. There is wine. I know you might have to get off, but do grab us now for a bit. It's not about showing off. Kids are in it. None of this is about people at the periphery going... It's not about showing off. Kids are in it. They're the centre of it. We shouldn't have people on the periphery going... How do we lead? How do we lead? Can you show the kids the world? Just how? How do we lead? How do we lead? Can you show the kids the world? There it is on a cow. Can you show them the world? Can you take some risks? And it's gone too quickly for honestly. Just before we said, "I wish we had a day." It's gone too quickly for honestly. Just before we said, "I wish we had a day." We hope that's gone all right. And there's my favourite education nailed. And there's my favourite quote. You take that back to your colleagues, especially the colleague who's buzzing because they've downloaded some really brilliant worksheets. Take that back to your TES, especially the colleague who's buzzing because they've downloaded some really brilliant worksheets of TES Connect. There's our direct emails, and we will. Please stay in touch with us. There's our Twitters if you like that kind of thing. There's our direct emails, and we love coming. Well, I've been here a few times. I absolutely love it, and I'm so glad that Debra's been able to experience a creative conversation with you. It's so brilliant for us to have this opportunity, and we thank the organisers. And yes, just very quickly, because a lot of this has been covered, and one of the things that's amazing around that is there's a huge debate about how we teach history, right? And one of the things that's continually complained about is children have no sense of chronology. In lots of parts of the country, it's been reduced to and what's happened with the history curriculum in lots of parts of the country is it's been reduced to a meaningless, shallow stopover, right? So we've just through time, this like Doctor Who on speed, so that people right? So we've just gone through this litany of great events, great names, great times, so that people don't have chronology. And there's a chronology of relationships, and they don't even have the understanding of chronology. And there's a chronology understood because it's built in the past. And the effort, interestingly, the effort around that time, because what you're doing is you're showing that clarity around what. And that's the bit where you need to take time, because what you're doing is you're showing that clarity around what children understand about the present and their incapacity to get beyond it. But what you do is you build that chronology, which remains a point of reference. The whole idea of studying a period, a patch, and the tension then goes between the whole idea of studying a period, a patch, as we used to call it, where you understand relationships, where you get that crucible of ideas, of context, of everything else, where you learn the lessons that you can apply elsewhere. And that's hard stuff that actually say we can't teach. There's a really simple and straightforward. And the efforts that we make to teach it are actually self-defeating. There's a really simple and straightforward way of doing pre-planning. And some of the stuff around that, I think it's wonderful how listening to you at the end talking about pre-planning. If there is such a concept, because the pre-planning is important, and it's that whole idea of post-planning. If there is such a concept,
And it's that whole idea of what have we done, therefore what do we have to build on, what can we use again, and where can we take this in terms of the further learning? Because what we can't do all the time is randomly find people in this room who've got to teach so that children have no sense of sequence or ideas. There are people in this room who've got to teach science, they've got to teach physics, and what we need to look at is got to get across. There is content that they must cover. And what we need to look at is how we can deploy this, but still make sure that we do that. And it's that tension. We talk in Scottish primary schools all the time about forward planning. That was ridiculous. We never talk of backward planning. After listening to you today, I used to think that was ridiculous. It's now I actually begin, after listening to you today, I actually begin to understand what that means. It's how do we gather what we've done? Because and I think it was superb actually that Ken introduced tonight conversation. Because one of the things that Ken's done a great deal is he's picked up in Paul Collard's conversation that he did with us. And he's particularly picked up in one of the slides that Paul Collard used when he was here. And what that slide is about how challenging it is to engage young people who have never seen a profit from learning in their lives. Middle-class children who will and the contrast that Paul Collard because it was between middle-class children who will engage with boredom. And he talked about how because it worked for them to engage with and invest in the curriculum. Because he talked about how people will automatically engage with and invest in the curriculum because they see the point of it. And what Hywel talked about it then and what Debra talked about throughout is how do you create the sense of botheredness that brings children in and who haven't had that front loading in terms of educational value. And if we're talking about raising attainment, and I know that we've talked about this before, if we're talking about genuinely raising attainment, the shift in attainment patterns will not progress in young up grade point. They will come from significant progress in young people currently not making that sense of closing the gap. And the real value around attainment is exactly that sense of closing the gap. And as well as being about equality, it's where the mother load is, which is academic and is research-based. You're coming across exactly the same findings that Hywel's coming across, which is academic and is research-based. You're coming across exactly the same findings that Hywel's coming across through some process of chaotic anecdotal experience. He just puts himself out there and learns from that. And read even more. He's just read a couple of books and written even more. But it's that. Hywel's just read some titles and wee summary things. But it's that crossover, I think. It's that crossover between the pre-planning and the post-planning, and that's where I think we can get the bridge from that open, free area where people feel safe to explore the curriculum, and those areas where we feel under pressure to quickly deliver results, because the time scales are short. And for most periods in Scottish education, the time scale is roughly 2 years. You have to garner all these basic so we can have a concept of early years as that 2-year period, in which you have to garner all these basic skills before you move on into that middle stage. And then you're all about acquiring the skills for transition to get you ready for the move to secondary. And then you've got a couple of years in secondary school where you've got a relatively open curriculum, and then you're into the race towards nationals or whatever it happens. And one of the other things, and grand nationals. But we've got all of that stuff, I think, going on. And one of the other things, and again, I'm grateful to both of you for making the point that if we'd had a day, what a day we could have had. I've done 2 workshops with Debra Kidd, and I did one workshop where she based it entirely around the Jabberwocky. Workshop last an hour, cadence, she covered the impact of rhythm and rhyme on memory, she covered cadence, she covered the impact of rhythm and rhyme on memory, she covered lots of things around technique, she covered lots of things around the richness of language and syntax, and she also helped people to create knowledge, to create understanding, to create experience, and put it together in a way that ultimately gave us a sense of satisfaction around what we've learned. And I love the whole thing. And the beginnings of that, I think, we got even from the session today. Because fundamentally, and I love the whole thing about dilemmas and how people learn through making choices. Because fundamentally, that's where Debra started. That it's about enabling people to make choices, not only around their learning, but around their lives and around their work. And that's what saves the vocational educational element that we're talking about at the moment. And changes because that's what makes it more than just simply preparation for compliance and changes it to readiness for work. Because it still builds in the element of choice and dilemma. And I thought that was richly done. And the other thing, I don't know whether anybody else picked up on this, but the other thing I absolutely loved about it, and Debra crystallised it out at one point, where they were really clear. I mean, I say what they were doing was creating an interaction between their knowledge and ours. I mean, their knowledge as a class. When I say their knowledge and ours, I don't mean the speakers and us as an audience. I mean, their knowledge as a class and our knowledge as teachers contributing. So we actually had the moments where what you were getting is you're getting the voice of the child contributing to what they knew and had not been taught, which was then responded to within the context of our knowledge, so that you got that bringing together of the learner's voice. The learner was helping to co-create around the learning, but the direction was always coming to that sense of purpose around the learning and through the point of that. And I just thought there was so much in that. The two things which I loved, one was the pre-planning and post-planning idea, which I will now ruthlessly exploit. But the bit that I just loved was Hywel's line. A curriculum is just something you download from the cloud. We breathe life into it. And I just loved that, because what that summed up for me was where we went wrong in not taking advantage of Peter Peacock's statement in Scotland years ago, that it shouldn't be a curriculum for excellence, it should be teachers for excellence, because it's us, it's you that make the difference. And if the curriculum gets in the road of you making that difference, then we need to find a way to work around it. And I think what we've had today is lots of brilliant ways and brilliant ideas of working away around it. I don't think we could have a better finish for creative conversation coming up to Christmas. I only have to stand next to her and I feel festive. From Market Harbour up to his house, which is somewhere I could recognise the pub. No idea really. It was dark by the time we got to the pub, and the only thing I could recognise was the pub that he took me to for the most incomprehensible pub quiz I've ever intended in my life.
Alright, who was he? Alright, who was he?
So he took me up there, and by the time I got out the car, I was just sore from smiling. And I just love that, and I love being around Debra Kidd. I just absolutely adore it, because one of the things that Debra has got is she's got the depth of knowledge, understanding and intellectualism which other people purport to have. You know, you can get endless people chanting out the same old bilge about a knowledge-based curriculum, Debra can match author after author, and getting into that whole thing. Debra can match anybody in that regard. I mean, for the love of God, she's written a book called Becoming Mobius. The difference what's that about? Right? So, you know, she can do that. The difference between her and these other people who are academic and intellectual is that every time she opens her mouth, you have a sense of care. Every time she opens her mouth, you have a sense of ambition. And every time she speaks, you genuinely have a sense of ambition that actually means something to work with. And when you can get somebody that can bring these qualities together, I don't know get him to work with. I mean, it's genius, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know about you, but it's been a brilliant weekend of Friday. Well, actually, nearly end of Friday, because it's great. And let's face it, it's great. Ladies and gentlemen, Debra Kidd.